G'day folks, this is Dragon. I made a video fairly recently on making handles for these fire steels, and you may recall the first one I made was with this bone, and while it's quite functional, I did mention in the video, and so did another forum member, that the bone could be longer to get that extra grip, which is right. Good comment, and it was worth noting. So had a thought about it. I've got a couple other ones to show you later on. About 4 or 5 days ago I was lucky enough to get hold of a hollow bone. This is actually off a lamb roast. Now this bone was cooked in an oven, baked in an oven. Which in a way is a good thing, because what happens then is that the fats and the oils and the meat actually soak into the bone. It's not cooked to the point where it's brittle, like if you throw it on an open fire or something like that, but it certainly absorbed a lot of the grease and fat. There was also a build-up of marrow in there, which had to be cleaned out. The way I did that was scraped as much as I could out, and then just brought up to a very quick boil in a hot saucepan of water, just to make sure that any remaining oils or fats inside there were removed. The ferro rod I found was, I looked at both ends of it and I thought, well, I could use that end, which would require quite a bit of packing around the ferro rod to keep it stable, or the narrower end, dare I risk it, wasn't quite the right diameter to fit this ferro rod in. So bit the bullet, and I thought, well, I'll try this end first. And what I did was, with a combination of a screwdriver and a very thin wood chisel, we started to chip some of the bone away to get the right diameter to fit this in. So that fits in there like that. It feels quite solid. Now, as in the pilot video of this, I used 2-pack glue. It's all I had at the time. I haven't got any pine sap. Certainly not enough to do the job anyway. Yes, certainly not going to find that in the bush. You're not going to find these ferro rods in the bush. In the survivalist community, there's a bit of a line drawn in the sand between preppers and survivalists. Well, for me it's not a very defined line, because this is the type of thing you would do at home or in a base camp, and it's called preparation, or preparing your gear for the time that you need it. Yes, 2-pack glue you're not going to find everywhere, but there are other natural resins you can use out there. It's just that I haven't got any with me today. The principle behind it is, the handle itself is roughly about the width of your palm. Now that'll vary from person to person, so you need to take that into consideration. So what I'll do now is I'll use some 2-pack glue, because I haven't got any pine resin with me, not enough to do the job. And I'll have a bit of a chat about a couple of other ones I've made while this is setting. Alright, back in a minute. Okay folks, while that glue is setting, the handles, I decided, well, why not try and make them out of wood? A bit longer. And what I used was a branch off a gum tree or eucalyptus tree. I stripped the bark off it and made a hole in the top to fit the ferro rod. Again, remembering that the hole's got to be a little bit oversized so you can fit whatever sort of type of resin that you're using in there. That's that one. And I rubbed that one down with Neatsford oil, then put some goat tallow or rendered fat that I had left over from last year from the candle making videos, to keep the wood fairly well oiled, to help reduce splitting and deterioration with age. And the same thing will happen with bone handles too, so you've got to keep them oiled. If you just bear with me with a sec, I'll just move very slowly. Those two there, that was the branch. It's dead. It's come off a tree. It's eucalypt. Roughly measured the size. Just checked it for any splits. This stuff dries out very quickly and starts to split. And if you have a look there, you can see that it's starting to split. So that's something to be aware of with any type of wood. That over time it will dry out and split, so you've got to keep it oiled with some sort of oil or rendered fat or tallow or something like that. What I did was, and I'll do one later on, I've still got another steel left, was cut it to roughly the width of your palm, strip the bark off, and don't throw it away because it makes very good kindling, having eucalyptus oil in it. And of course any wood shavings that you need to do, or you need to shave some wood off, say that too, because it makes very good kindling as well. So nothing really goes to waste. But anyway, those two that we just showed you a minute or so ago actually came off that branch. I won't use this one again because it's dried out a bit since I've cut it and it's starting to split. But I do have another one here, a little bit thicker. As you can see there, it's split down there, but back here it doesn't look too bad, so I'm going to have to cut that off and work with a handle section from here, hopefully. Again, you make kindling wood chips out of this to carry in your fire kits, same with the bark, so nothing really goes to waste. It makes very good kindling. Alright, I'll just go back over to the two steels. Now, a couple of things I found. Jeez, I'll take some more painkillers soon, I think. Alright, the second one I bound up with, the handle up with hoochie cord. That's what we call hoochie cord here in Australia. I don't know what it's called overseas. But it's very strong cord, very durable, very rugged, and weatherproof too. So I actually bound the handle with that just for something different. Kiwi Bow Hunter put a very good post on the forum about how to do that, and this was done the same way. Unfortunately with this one, when I put the steel in there and just gave it a bit of a tap just to wedge it in nice and tight, a crack started to appear. So I used a 2-pack glue and painted the whole wooden handle with it, and that's held up quite well. Then I bound it with this just to make sure that it all stays together. It's one of the risks of working with wood. It looks good until you do something, and sometimes it cracks. Now, hacksaw strikers. No doubt most of us, or if not all of us, have seen information on the net, particularly with these types of fire steels, about using hacksaw strikers, bits and pieces of hacksaw blades. And depending on the make and quality of the hacksaw blade, there's a couple of problems I've found, and it hasn't been explained very well on the net. These are hacksaw blades I've got here at home. Now, with most commercial strikers that come with this, if you buy the commercial ones, they have a very sharp edge on it, or sometimes the hacksaw blades on the back of the spine here are not very sharp. Certainly not sharp enough to create a lot of spark off these, which you sometimes need to light fires or tinder in difficult times. So what I did with this was hit it with a file. It's very hard steel, and put a bit of an edge on it. Not as sharp as a knife, but it's certainly a lot sharper than it was. Another thing I found was too that if you want a good shower of sparks, you can use the teeth of the blade. Now admittedly it does chew up the blade, the fire steel puts a lot of grooves in it, but if you're in one of those situations where you're finding it hard to light your tinder or your char material, or whatever the case may be, and you need a good shower of sparks, you can actually use the teeth of the blade. I wouldn't recommend using it too often because it does considerably wear down your fire steel. The other point I'd like to mention here too is that where you snap the hacksaw blade off, that's a very sharp edge, okay, and by doing it this way, just give a light demo on it. You don't need a lot of pressure either. Okay, you just go. You can see the quality of the spark there, which is quite good, very good. So that's something to be aware of if you're using hacksaw blades as a striker for these. It's not just the back edge you've got to be concerned with, it's got to be sharp. You'll find on some hacksaw blades that the edges are a little bit rounded, too rounded to actually get a good spark off these. So you've got to sharpen them up a bit. The teeth. As you can see, it's scored the rod very well, so that's going to wear the rod out very quickly, but it does throw a good spark in those difficult times. And of course the end there where you've snapped it off, so that's something to keep in the back of the mind, folks. So they've come up pretty well actually. Nice grip, not exactly compact as far as length goes, but for me that doesn't worry me. Because I've got to make up my own fire kits yet, and that's another video project. So this one I've sharpened up. I've still got to sharpen this one up, the spine of it, the back of it. So and I always carry a couple of spare strikers. All right, folks, that'll do that for the time being, and I'll get back to you as soon as this glue dries. All sets. I'm using 2-pack glue. It's waterproof. And it's a lot stronger too, so that's all I've got at the moment. And before you YouTube troll come and jump down the idiotic comments, I'm using what I've got, and that's what it's all about. You can certainly use other resins, natural resins you can make in the bush. The idea is to make this at home in preparation for any type of survival scenario. And that's all part of the deal. Alright, back soon. Okay folks, just making another wooden handle for one of these fire steels. And you may remember that was the end of the stick I showed you. Had a lot of splits on it. Okay. So what I did was, as I mentioned before, was go further down the stick where it wasn't cracked, and if you have a look there, there's no cracks going into the wood. So the piece I cut out looks something like that. And of course the other end too, so there's no real splits in that wood. It is very dry wood. So when it comes to putting the hole in it for the fire steel, you've got to be very careful that you're very gentle with it so it doesn't split. I might also add here too that because of the nature of this particular type of wood, particularly when it's dry, I used a hacksaw blade to cut it. I need a very fine blade to cut it. If you're using a carpenter's saw or anything like that, then it's likely to split on you or splinter on you, so a hacksaw blade is much better to use as a finer cut for this particular type of wood. That will vary with other types of wood that you may want to use, but that's what I use for this one. As I mentioned before, what I've done is I've stripped the bark off this Still needs a bit of work on there just to clean it up a bit. But there's the bark there. Okay, so that, if you've got a fire kit, that makes very good kindling because there's still a certain amount of eucalypt oil in there, which we know is flammable. And so as I said before, nothing goes to waste. Alright, back soon. Okay folks, that's the handle I showed you before. We cut out of that eucalypt stick. What I did was, after removing the outer bark, there's a very thin layer of soft underbark which had to be removed too. The way I did that was just using a normal hand file. I needed a fairly fine one so I didn't damage the actual timber too much. So that's come up pretty well. You can see there it's roughly about the width of my palm, and as I said before, this will vary from person to person. Another point too is the wood shavings off that. Might be a good idea to, if you can collect it in sufficient quantities, makes very good stuff to keep in your tinder box if you want to strike it using a fire steel method of lighting a fire. So that's pretty well there. You may be able to see some of the file groove marks, and I'll run a bit of emery paper over it just to smooth it off. Now the next idea is to put the hole in there for the fire steel. Now because these ones are 1/4 inch in diameter, it's got to be a little bit oversized. The hole has to be a little bit oversized so that whatever adhesive you're using, it can also be put into the hole around the fire steel and secure it properly. So for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to use a cordless drill to drill a hole. I just haven't got the fitness today to start using wood carving tools trying to cut a hole out of this. So but the end result is pretty much the same. So I'll run a bit of emery paper over this, and what I'll do with this is, once it's all put together, I'll actually oil it with some Kneadsford oil, and I've got some rendered tallow inside from last year, and also rub that into the wood too, and help slow down the drying out and cracking process. So see you soon. Okay folks, this is the last wooden handle, and that's the hole I put in the end of it to fit the ferro rod in. Okay, so it's for this particular ferro rod, it's probably around about 3/16 deep and 1/4 inch in diameter. You can get longer ferro rods, it's just I've got these ones, so I'll try and do one-handed. Let's fit this in here. Goes in there fairly snugly. Just give it a light tap. Make sure that it's seated properly, not too hard. And there we go. So all it needs now is some adhesive to hold it in place. Certainly if you tried to strike that now, your rod would probably eventually fall out of the hole in the end of that handle. So you do need some sort of adhesive in there. So anyway, we'll go away and do that. Just checked on the bone handle one, and it's the adhesive has set quite nicely. So back soon. G'day folks. Well, this is the end of the update on the fire steel handles. If you remember, that's the first one I made in the first video, and that's all the bone I had to work with at the time. As I said in the video, and Wayne mentioned too that the handle could be longer to fit more into your palm. Fortunately, got hold of a better bone, hollow leg bone, Yeah, I got carpet burn on one knee begging for this bone. But that's the finished product. I've rubbed it down with some rendered tallow from last year. That's kept remarkably well actually. Ferro rod is very secure in there, it's not moving, the bone hasn't split, and what I've done is just cut up some rubber bands from an old bike tyre tube and just wrapped it up there. This one is one of the earlier wooden handle ones I made, I mentioned before, wrapped with hoochie cord, and as I said, there's a very good post on the forum from Kiwi Bowhunter on how to do that, and this one was done the same way. I think Kiwi Bowhunter did it with paracord. This is done with hoochie cord. That's another one I did a few days ago. Very secure, and they do work. I've tried them with the strikes, you can see where they've been tested. And this is the one we made today. The longer handle. The commercial striker that came with the pack of rods. And what I did with that one is oil the wooden handle down with Kneesford oil. You can also use tallow on it too. So that's just to stop either the bone or the wooden handles from or slow down the deterioration and cracking process. So a couple of points to remember, I'll point them out again, is the strikers. If you're using hacksaw blades, you may have to modify them. During this video I showed the way I modified these particular hacksaw blades, and the fact that you can use the back of the blade. It's been modified, it needs a reasonably sharp edge, it doesn't have to be knife sharp. You can use the teeth of the hacksaw, but be aware that will chew up the fire steel and wear it out a lot quicker. So, but if you're in one of those situations where you're having trouble getting your tinder started, or your chart cloth, or whatever you're using, and you need that extra spark, using the teeth of the hacksaw blade is one way to do it. And of course, where the hacksaw blade is snapped off, that's another sharp edge. That throws out a good shower of sparks too. So there it is. Whatever adhesive you're using, as I said, I use 2-pack. That's all I've got at the moment. But whether it's that or it's natural, made out of some sort of plant sap or whatever the case may be, one of the things you've got to be careful of is that it will adhere to the two different types of material that you're using. The rod and whatever you're using for the handle, be it wood, bone, or some other type of handle. They're not the only type of handles you can use. You can use metal handles, aluminium rod, probably copper rod, something like that. This is just what I've done. They're reasonably compact even though they're long, but I'm rehashing my fire kits at the moment, so they'll fit in there just nicely. So that's pretty well it, folks. Certainly these four here are much more comfortable to hold than this one. So I'm open to any constructive comments or ideas. That's what I've done. There are probably other ideas out there, so let's hear about them. Thanks very much for watching.